of disasters, 2026 begins in Russia with earthquakes, breakdowns and spreading chaos. Resort in shock, Sochi is rocked, people rush into the streets, the illusion of calm collapses in seconds. Snow apocalypse across Russia, highways turn into ice rinks, hundreds of crashes, entire regions grind to a halt. A country without power or heat, Russians melt snow to survive, women give birth in freezing conditions, railway meltdown, dozens of freight cars derail, logistics are falling apart. Europe strikes first. A Russian shadow fleet vessel is seized. New year, new failure. Russia enters 2026 in full survival mode. All the details coming up in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Russia is in flames once again. Ukrainian drones struck Russia's Belgorod Oblast, unleashing a fierce spectacle in the city of Starye Skol. The region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov, confirmed a strike on an oil depot. According to him, detonations triggered fires in several fuel tanks. Some Telegram channels report that the Tatneft facility was hit, while others claim it was Oskol Naftopostaj, one of the largest fuel and lubricant suppliers in the region. Even the deeper area is under fire. Loud explosions, massive fires and evacuations followed. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, defense forces struck Arsenal No. 100 of Russia's main missile and artillery directorate in the Neysky district of Kostroma Oblast. In addition, Security Service of Ukraine drones hit the Kherson Plus oil depot in Lipetsk Oblast, sparkling an intense blaze. The facility supplied fuel to 3 regions at once: Tambov, Voronezh and Lipetsk. Russia opens 2026 with an alarming signal. In the middle of an otherwise cold January day, when resort town Sochi was living under an illusion of safety, the ground suddenly reminded everyone of its power. A dull underground rumble trembling beneath people's feet, frozen faces. An earthquake measuring 4.1 magnitude struck the Black Sea area. The underground shock was strong enough to be felt along the coast. The epicenter was just 40 kilometers from Sochi and 9 kilometers from Lazarevskaya. Windows rattled, people rushed out of their homes. In central Sochi, the tremors were estimated at 3 points, as if a heavy truck had rolled straight through the city. Even that was enough to shatter the sense of resort calm. Sochi Mayor Andrei Pershunin urgently went public and confirmed the incident on Telegram.
The earthquake's epicenter was located in the Black Sea, approximately 5 kilometers off the coast of Sochi. The magnitude of the tremors in the Lazarevsky district was 4.0 on the Richter scale, and in the central district, 3.0 on the Richter scale.
But this is only the beginning. The New Year holidays turned into a real stress test for city services. Sochi was hit by heavy snowfalls and hurricane-force winds. Roads were paralyzed, garbage collection disrupted, and the city was forced to operate in full emergency mode.
Wind gusts caused over 400 trees to fall. Specialized teams are working in every district of the city to mitigate the aftermath.
Shock! Mass accidents in Russia's Rostov region. Motorists are in panic as highways have turned into an icy hell. After heavy snowfalls, hard frost set in, making the roads deadly dangerous. Meanwhile, a transport collapse on the Russia-Georgia border. Hundreds of vehicles are trapped in a snowbound standstill. The land border is closed. Tourists and local residents are spending the night in their cars. People were heading to visit relatives and to the Gudari ski resort, but instead lost both their money and their peace of mind. When the crossing will reopen, no one knows.
Грейдер ползает.
And in Russia's Adygea, total chaos. There is no electricity, women are giving birth in freezing conditions, people are melting snow just to flush toilets, and some are getting around on horseback. This is nothing short of genocide, Russians complain. The start of 2026 is a real catastrophe for Russia. Oil refineries are burning, power plants are in flames, entire districts are left without electricity, and Moscow is bracing for a total blackout. So what lies ahead of this failing quasi-empire? To put it mildly, the outlook is grim. Here are all the details.
Russia is waking up more and more often without electricity, heat, or any sense of stability. Almost every day, there are new strikes on the energy infrastructure. Massive oil refineries and numerous thermal power plants. It's quite a significant mess. And again, oil refineries. Entire districts are losing electricity, and along with it,
the process of heating, which involves the transfer of thermal energy to increase temperature, is a fundamental concept.
Accidents at thermal power plants, fires at oil refineries, and large-scale blackouts. These are no longer isolated incidents, but a systemic pattern in Russia.
Everything that mirrors the war onto the territory of the Russian Federation can undoubtedly be considered a success. Ukraine has done exactly what Russia did not expect.
In many regions of Russia, a power plant shutdown means not only darkness, but also cold. People are left without heating and hot water, even in places where there have been no strikes on infrastructure.
If you had never done it before, filling an entire bathtub with snow just to go to the bathroom so it would melt and you'd have at least some water. If you always had that, then everything was always fine for you. I came to get water so I could wash the dishes.
But if such failures happen even without Ukraine's involvement, the question arises, what's going on with Russia's energy infrastructure?
If they're still somehow managing with the cities, Russians try to resolve the issue, somehow carry out repairs as quickly as possible. How well that works out for their energy infrastructure is another question. But when it comes to villages, obviously, villages aren't electorally important. Not many people live there, so Putin, excuse the slang, just doesn't care.
What's surprising is that even in Russia, people understand that their situation is far from ideal.
If we carefully look at the official information about precisely how worn out our essential utility system is right now, it becomes rather profoundly alarming. And if you then add significant external impacts to that, honestly, it truly doesn't inspire much optimism.
Oil refineries are a particularly vulnerable point. They support not only Russia's economy, but also its formidable army.
Significant problems frequently arise both during essential repairs at large-scale oil refineries, because that particular process invariably requires a substantial amount of financial investment and a very great deal of valuable time to complete, and also with the complex task of repairing the intricate logistics networks, which often has a profound and far-reaching kind of house of cards effect. Consequently, when you cause one critical element to collapse or fail, all the other interconnected elements tend to collapse simultaneously at precisely the same time.
Repairs drag on, reserves are insufficient, and the winter period only amplifies the consequences of accidents.
These systemic problems with energy in the Russian Federation have become extremely difficult to solve, both because of money and because of the lack of all the necessary components for repairs, since some of them are, again, import dependent. In other words, Russia does not produce them itself, but buys them from abroad. And this is where, once again, the sanctions mechanisms come into play.
Of course, the bunker dweller spares no money for war, but when it comes to heating the homes of his citizens, he is very stingy.
Naturally, the level of discontent is rising, and this discontent is no longer just in rural areas where blackouts happen. Now, this negativity is actually concentrating in the big cities.
An energy crisis, even without Ukraine's involvement, is becoming a new reality for Russians. It's expensive, risky, and increasingly unmanageable.
Just one day, say, with temperatures at minus 20 degrees in conditions where there is no heating can destroy the entire system. So we really hope, of course, that it won't come to that. It's important to monitor specifically to ensure that the heating plants aren't damaged, especially if, for example, the strikes on thermal power stations continue.
When blackouts and lack of heat occur even without external interference, it speaks to the state of the system. For Russia, such failures are increasingly becoming the norm, and with the involvement of friendly drones, it's turning into a completely new reality.
And while Russia is being torn apart by natural disasters, Finland shows resolve. Finnish special forces have seized a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel. Video of the operation has emerged. Helicopters deploy troop onto the deck, the crew is secured, and the ship is towed to Kantwick port. 14 crew members have been detained. Sabotage continues. An underwater communications cable between Finland and Estonia has been damaged again in the Gulf of Finland. Finland promptly detained the cargo vessel Fitberg, which was traveling from St. Petersburg to Haifa with its anchor chain lowered near the side of the break. President Alexander Stubb confirmed the investigation and emphasized that it concerns the protection of critical infrastructure. Here are the details.
Sabotage on the open sea. On December 31st, Finnish police detained the ship Fitberg, which was traveling from St. Petersburg to Haifa, Israel, on suspicion of damaging an underwater telecommunications cable laid from Helsinki to Estonia across the Gulf of Finland.
Whether the true and actual purpose of this particular ship was to transport valuable cargo from St. Petersburg all the way to the Mediterranean Sea is still a very significant and open question. How indeed? In many cases, ships of the so-called Russian Shadow Fleet sailing under various flags but still referred to as Russian because when you start digging, first of all, they are under sanctions, and secondly, as soon as you start investigating, suddenly Russian flags are raised on them and they are registered in the Russian registry.
According to media reports, 14 crew members from Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan have been arrested. The detainees began to be interrogated on the evening of December 31st.
In the first place, it was necessary to gather information because, after all, the number of such incidents is steadily increasing. There is growing criticism from European Union countries about the lack of a tough response to incidents that occur on a regular basis. If this had been just a one-off incident somewhere, and nothing like it had happened again, then one could say, unfortunately, it happened, but it won't happen again, and so on.
The police stated that they are investigating the disruption of telecommunication systems under aggravating circumstances, as well as sabotage and attempted sabotage under aggravating circumstances.
There are two different concepts in international maritime law. The first is the regime of maritime waters. The second concept is the regime of the seabed. This is the so-called exclusive economic zone. In exclusive economic zones, everything on and beneath the seabed is the property of the coastal state. Any illegal actions are subject to serious legal and potential criminal prosecution under the full extent of the law.
Finnish authorities have also launched an underwater investigation in the area where the cable was damaged.
We fully understand the geographical situation. Finland, Sweden, and Norway, these three distinct and independent nations, which are notably not currently part of the European Union, are essentially three sovereign countries that are geographically cut off and isolated from the vast majority of the rest of continental Europe, primarily because by land they can only realistically reach the main continental European landmass through the extensive Russian territory. And when cables that provide communication between Northern Europe and mainland Europe are systematically being cut, that's a problem. And that's something you might do if you're preparing to attack Northern Europe. At the
National Bureau of Investigation of Finland, they stated that there are certain distinguishing circumstances in the current incident that are similar to previous cases. Damage to underwater infrastructure in the Gulf of Finland.
I believe it's high time for the European Court to change its protocols. The behavior in the Baltic Sea, both regarding the Shadow Fleet tankers and the incidents where cables are cut, because this is not an accident, it's a deliberate course of action, and accordingly, we need to fight against it. And when you don't fight it, you get repetition. Last
Wednesday morning, on the eve of the new year, 2026, the Finnish telecommunications operator Elisa discovered a malfunction in its cable and reported this to the Finnish authorities. The company also stated that the damage in no way affected the operation of the services and that all of them had been rerouted.
The Gerasimov Doctrine, the hybrid warfare doctrine of General Gerasimov, which was proclaimed back in 2007, or more precisely formulated, has since been fleshed out, given real substance, through actual activities during that period. Somewhere after 2014, and in parallel with the large-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia's actions against European countries intensified. The Russians are waging a hybrid war against Europe.
It should be noted that a year ago there was already a similar incident involving damage to the underwater cables connecting Finland and Estonia.
Who sank the Russian vessel off the coast of Spain? The mystery surrounding the loss of the cargo ship Ursa Major from Russia's Shadow Fleet is back in the spotlight for investigators. More on the new facts and discoveries in this high-profile case coming up next.
A Russian ship that sank off the coast of Cartagena was hiding 2 nuclear reactors intended for North Korea. This was the headline of an article published in the Spanish newspaper La Verdad. The investigative journalists of the news outlet refer in their article to details from the official investigation. The Russian cargo ship Ursa Major, which sank off the coast of Spain in 2024, was carrying parts of a nuclear reactor intended for North Korea.
The case materials mention 2 blue containers on the stern of the vessel that did not match the description of the cargo declared by the ship's captain, Igor Anisimov. Investigators believe that the containers held 2 VM-4SG reactors for nuclear submarines. They were supposed to be delivered from St. Petersburg to the North Korean port of Rason.
Recall that in December 2024, the Russian Shadow Fleet ship Ursa Major was crossing Gibraltar. On December 21st, Spanish Maritime Search and Rescue Services noticed that the vessel was changing course in an unusual way. And on December 22nd, the Ursa Major veered to the left, slowed down, and began to drift. The next day, a distress signal was received and the Spanish authorities dispatched search and rescue teams. Rescuers found 14 survivors. 2 engineers went missing. The captain of the Ursa Major reported that the vessel was carrying 100 empty containers, 2 giant crawler cranes, and 2 large components for an icebreaker. According to him, the cargo was destined for Vladivostok, but later, Spanish investigators identified that part of the cargo on the icebreaker was actually a pair of hulls from VM-4SG nuclear submarine reactors. Such reactors are still installed on 6 Dolphin-class nuclear submarines. These submarines carry ballistic missiles, and this kind of cargo became the reason for an attack by one of the NATO countries.
The Ursa Major became the target of an attack by one of the Western countries. The hole on the starboard side matches the damage caused by a supercavitating torpedo with a warhead diameter of 500 millimeters. Such torpedoes are in service with some NATO countries.
Previously, the Ursa Major cargo ship was involved in transporting weapons, carrying cargo for the so-called Syrian Express. This was the supply route for Russian troops in Syria. This was noted by OSINT analysts.
Since 2017, the Sparta and Ursa Major have been operating as part of the Syrian Express, delivering cargo to supply the Russian contingent in Syria. In 2022, both vessels began to be used for ferry and container shipments to Kaliningrad.
The investigation revealed that 2 undeclared containers, each weighing 65 tons, were identified as reactor covers for the VM-4SG nuclear reactor. Drone photos showed cooling pipes and other reactor system components. Spanish authorities are convinced that the cargo's destination was the North Korean port city of Rason, just a few kilometers from Vladivostok. Suspicions about the cargo intensified after a Russian military ship, allegedly in the area of the disaster by coincidence, offered to take control of the rescue operation.
What do you think about what's happening in Russia? We're waiting for your comments. There's much more to come. Stay tuned for the key updates. Don't forget to hit like. See you soon.